Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for jumping on to this quick call. We'll hopefully only keep you for about 30 minutes or so, but I appreciate your interest in the 25th annual New Ventures BC competition presented by Innovate BC and also the Road to Web Summit this year. So my name's Angie. I'm the Executive Director of New Ventures BC. And with me today is Floyd Sijmons. He is our mentor and jury wrangler for the competition, and we'll speak a little bit on the mentors and jury members a little bit later. And then also Justine from New Ventures BC is helping us behind the scenes. So thanks again for joining us. Feel free to drop questions anytime while I'm talking through all the kind of minute details in the chat, or you can take yourself off mute at the end. I'll go through all the info, and then you can feel free to take yourself off the chat and ask away. But hopefully this should answer most of your questions. Okay, so I'm going to jump in to just give you the quick overview, and then we'll kind of go from there. So New Ventures BC, what competition, what is it? So first, New Ventures BC ourselves, we're a nonprofit organization. We are most known for running BC's largest and longest tech competition, started back in 2001. We do also run some other programs. We run the Accelerate IP program for supporting startups and scale-ups with intellectual property strategy and implementation. We also run a program called IP Pathways, which is IP education pretty much monthly, and that's in partnership with the province of BC and Innovate BC as well. And we also have a few various accelerator programs we support companies with year-round. So all that info, if you're going to be looking into the competition or events, they're all online, so newventuresbc.com. But today we're talking about the competition, which is, of course, my favorite event, if I had to pick. So it is 4 rounds, so typically going from March through to September. Of course, what everyone hears is you have a chance to win up to $250,000 in total cash and prizes. But there's also a lot to it. I always like to say to people, it's a venture competition, not a pitch competition. There's certainly pitching involved, but we're trying to find the best venture or the most promising startup venture. So to help support that journey for you, we offer a lot of education and networking events to help with understanding what it takes to be an entrepreneur, to help build your networks. We also try to build in a lot of feedback points. So you'll submit various things throughout the competition. I'll get into that in a little bit. And you'll hopefully be getting some general feedback, either written or verbal, based on how far and what you're doing. So that's kind of the competition in a nutshell, and let's get into it. So like I said, we're not just a competition. We have been around a while, so we are very proud to be part of the journey for lots of BC tech startups in the province. And like I said, lots of different components to the programming. And then the other part I didn't mention previous is really that we are hoping that this competition is a good introduction to the BC tech ecosystem. So the speakers you meet, the mentors you meet, a lot of them are working with other accelerators and organizations within the BC and the Vancouver ecosystem, and that's fantastic. That's hopefully what we're trying to do, is to give you that introduction, help you understand what else is available for you, and then you, knowing your company and your team and your strengths and your weaknesses, can kind of navigate from there. So you get to the end where you come for the party. This is, I think, last year's award ceremony, so it's always a fun time. Every year we take a good crowd shot, so this is from last year. So in terms of who is eligible to enter, here's our baseline. So you have to be BC-based company. We say majority of activity in BC, so that's not to say you should be making all your revenue in BC. You can, of course, as a scaling or a company with the aspirations to go international, that's fantastic. It's more kind of headquartered. Your founders are primarily based in BC, because I think I mentioned the competition is presented by Innovate BC, which is provincial government. So the underlying objective is to support BC-based companies. Other guidelines is private company, not incorporated more than 5 years is the general rule. You don't have to be incorporated at entry either. So if you're not incorporated, that's okay. If you are incorporated, general guideline is 5 years or less to keep you in that startup category. There are exceptions. Often we'll have companies that have been around maybe longer than 5 years, but they're doing a substantial pivot, and it's a complete pivot. So it's a completely different product, completely different strategy. So we will often grant exceptions in that case. Other common example is more of a consulting practice firm that has a product they've decided they want to build and commercialize. So consulting company maybe has been around more than 5 years, but the actual product that they are working on is quite new. So in those cases, just send us a quick note and we can take a look at your own case and give you a call from there. Other guideline is raise less than $1 million of non-grant funding from any source as of the competition deadline, which is March 31st. So that's primarily I'd say investment. If you raise more than $1 million in dilutive investment, congratulations, but you're probably not eligible for the competition. But if you are more of a research-based startup, maybe you've gotten some government or some university grants, those would not count towards the total, as an example. And again, if you're not sure, feel free to reach out. And then there's an online application form you complete for the first round, and that's what's due by March 31st. And there's a $200 entry fee. That includes your entire team. We're never going to ask you for anything beyond $200. That includes all the education, all the networking, the competition process as well. So just to dig into some of the components I mentioned, we always start the competition with lots of education and networking opportunities. So the first few will be starting in a few weeks at the end of March. So we'll have a kickoff event March 27th. So that will be just general networking to meet the community. We'll also have a few of the winners from last year on a panel, so you can kind of learn from them, ask them questions about if the competition's right for you, and just get to know everyone. Then we'll also start our education series that week. So Saturday, March 29th, we do a full day of startup education topics. And then following that, pretty much every week, Wednesdays, 4:30 to 6:30, I believe, we'll be doing a education topic. And then we'll probably have a webinar that's in person and streaming. And then we'll do webinars for many of those weeks as well. So every week there'll be minimum one, probably two education topics for you to utilize all the way through to the end of May. And depending on what stage you're at, you might be really just thinking of a couple ideas and doing some evaluation, so you might not want to enter the competition. You can still come to our education networking events, get involved. You don't have to be in the competition to attend the education events. And on the inverse, if you're in the competition, it's not mandatory that you attend the education events. We, of course, always highly recommend them. But if you miss one, we don't take that into consideration when we're looking at you from the competition side of things either. So this is really just meant to help grow the kind of the knowledge base of startups here in the province. Okay, so for mentorship, we're quite known in the competition for all the different mentorship components in the competition. So I think I introduced Floyd earlier, who is our official, we say, Wrangler of our mentors. So I'm going to pass it over to Floyd for a moment to just tell us about the various, who the volunteer mentors are and kind of the types of support they get. So Floyd, over to you.
Thank you very much. Absolutely. Hello, everyone. Yeah, my name is Floyd, mentor wrangler at the competition in the 25th year now. This is really one of the primary values provided to companies that join the competition. It all starts with, in round 2, you do a submission of 5 pages as a company, basically. And then you have 6 judges reviewing that and providing feedback and commentary, some more than others, to those companies in that process. You can also, if you don't make it afterwards to the next stage, you can also connect with a mentor to provide guidance on next steps that are relevant for your particular business. It's really a one-on-one call there. Once we get the top 40, there's pitch coaching, and then top 25, each company gets associated, hooked up to 2 to 3 mentors from the network. I do that based on relevance and how much a person can theoretically contribute to an individual company. And just to put this all a little bit in perspective, right, there's multiple stages where you can get access to these people, and these are all volunteers. They are by and large, there's over 360 of them now associated with the competition. And they're by and large ex-founders, current executive, CEO, investors, lots of investors in there. Also past winners. And I also put quite a bit of effort in getting domain experts, both on technical, but also a deep tech and academic side, a PhD, professors, that kind of stuff, in an effort to really maximize offering help and hooking up the right people who can make a real difference in a company's individual journey, basically. This is really one of the primary things. A key thing that New Ventures BC competition delivers with this is access to ecosystem and expertise they might struggle with to get to themselves. And thanks to the great work that the team has done over the last 25 years, we're thankfully able to get that many people of such high caliber involved with the competition and basically offering you access to them if you join. So yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Floyd. And I think as we get deeper in the competition, Floyd and others will give tips on how to best leverage taking advantage of the mentors you're assigned to as well. All right. So, like I said, $250,000 in cash and prizes. We are, full disclosure, still finalizing some details. We're actually a little bit ahead of schedule this year than typically, because we want to line things up with the upcoming Web Summit conference. So there's a couple of things still being finalized, but it will be about $250,000 in cash and prizes. We are very always privileged to have Innovate BC as our title sponsor, and they also sponsor a lot of the prizes, including the $110,000 first prize package that includes $80,000 cash and then $30,000 of in-kind. In-kind prizes are hopefully prizes you can utilize. Probably the big ones are legal services, financial services from Fasken and EY, and then all sorts of various programs from kind of the angel groups in town, organizations like the Vancouver Entrepreneurs Forum, things that will either get you connected to the community or a bit more services to help you grow. Yeah, but those are the prizes for now. More details on that coming. Some of our past winners. So this slide last year, I was just all text. I just had all the names, but we have a great team here this year, and I was advised logos, Angie, would be nicer. So we have just selected a few of our past winners. The first three, Timesick, Skyek, or Skikrum, they were 1, 2, and 3 last year. You'll be hearing from a couple of them at our kickoff event as well. And then some of the other companies are some of the more well-known BC companies, Jane Software, Upseller, Mindsense, certain based in Victoria. They've all become big kind of anchors of the BC tech scene, and more to come. What else? These are just some comments from some of the companies last year that talk about their experience. I'm not going to read them to you. What I will say is what I like about these quotes is there's not really a lot of talk about prize money. Prize money is great, but our hope is you're getting benefit in other ways via all the different programming and opportunities to meet with the network, the mentors and the judges, etc. Okay. Give that a sec. And just a note, we are recording and we will put this up on our website. So if I went too fast, you can refer to that later. Okay, competition format. I'll talk about this a little bit just so you have an idea of how it goes. Like I said, right now we're in round 1. So it's an online application form. Deadline is March 31st. Typically, I tell people this is primarily an eligibility check. So I mentioned the eligibility previously. If you are eligible, you will advance to round 2. So as a result, don't spend too much time on the form. You definitely want to keep it accurate, but we are checking primarily for eligibility. So I typically tell people complete the form, but don't spend too much time crafting the perfect answer, because it's the next round, round 2, which is due kind of late May, or not, sorry, late April, pardon me, that it goes more through the formal judging process. So for right now, online form, start registering for the events, and that's it. And then we get into it. So round 2, it's actually from April to May this year. Apologies, I forgot to update that. And that's you're submitting a 5-page submission. That 5-page submission is based on a few questions we provide that you answer. We also ask you to record a 60-second elevator pitch. I believe it's optional, but I think probably 80% or so do submit it. And The questions are on our website if you're curious. If you go to the competition rules, there's all the questions are listed in there if you want to take a quick sneak peek. So those submissions get reviewed by 5 to 6 judges who are either going to be generalist business people or people within a particular sector that can help review your submission. Gets scored on a rubric, and then based on how the scoring goes, we get ourselves down to a top 40. So I think if you see there, round one, we get anywhere from 180 to a little over 200 entries a year. So it's a pretty big cut, not gonna lie. So what we do, if say you don't get to the top 40, we will give you the option to do a one-on-one session with a New Ventures BC mentor to go through your application, talk about maybe some things that worked that may not have worked to help give you that additional round of feedback and support and another contact. But otherwise, in round 2 of the competition, we're down to a top 40. So the top 15 ranking from that 5-page submission move on right to round 3. And the next 25, they do pitch practice, and then they pitch to a live jury, and the top 10 of those advance to round 3. So that's how we get from the 40 to the 25 in round 3. Once we get into round 3, that will this year again, we're up a month, so May through to the beginning of August as well. We extended that round. That's you get paired with your 2 to 3 mentors. You have access to a couple more detailed workshops and mentor panel as well, which is kind of a practice gentle version of Dragon's Den. It's usually the easiest way to explain it, which is more on feedback to help you improve. And then you submit an 8-page submission. So that's another set of questions we provide that gets reviewed by a separate jury. And then from that gets scored on a pretty simple rubric, and the top 10 are chosen from those 25. So then you advance to the top 10, which is usually at the beginning of September. So that same jury then will attend live pitches. You give a 20-minute pitch to that jury, or 15-minute, I believe, 15-minute pitch to that jury, and then 25 minutes of Q&A. And from that pitch and Q&A, that's how the judges determine the winners. If you're in the top 10, we do typically also do kind of a demo day / showcase day to a community of angel investors and related people to help give some more celebration and exposure. And we also do that for the top 25 as well. So that's kind of how it goes at high level. And then from the top 10, the winners, there's an award ceremony at the end of September, beginning of October. And that's where we announce the winners. And we have a big celebration. Okay, so some commonly asked questions. I unfortunately can't quite see the chat, so apologies if there's a question that I haven't been able to easily answer, but these are the questions we often get. So first, registration process question. So I kind of already talked about that, which is really, it's an online form. Don't spend too much time. If you answer a question and we're not 100% sure if you're eligible or not eligible, we will email you. We'll ask some follow-up questions. We're not gonna take your $200 and say, oh, sorry, not eligible, see you later. So we will refund you at this stage if you're not eligible. So if you're not sure, you can ask us a question, but also we will follow up if we need more information. Otherwise, we'll review everything. And whether you typically we'll follow up with you kind of ongoing through now and March 31st, but we don't do the final call of who's in the next round until after the March 31st deadline. So you'll kind of apply, you'll get a confirmation message, and then you'll probably hear from us more formally after March 31st. In terms of stage of venture, it definitely varies. So general eligibility criteria is less than 5 years old, raise less than $1 million for sure. So within that range, still quite wide. I'd say the majority of our companies are pre-revenue, but there are certainly some that are in revenue. Many companies are going to be in the idea stage. Some will be in market and have some revenue. So I wouldn't say it's purposely meant to be wide. It's purposely meant to be for the early stage. If you're later stage, like if you're in market and have revenue, does that mean you're going to be better than a company maybe pre-revenue, pre-market entry. Not necessarily, depends on your sector. It also depends if you are in market, what your traction's like, right? And what your success indicators are like. So it does really vary. It's the reason why you'll see in round two, we ask quite a few questions to get a sense of where things are at. So I wouldn't make that assumption, but typically we have, I would say, Floyd, correct me if you disagree, but I'd say at least 70% of our companies are pre-revenue. And then maybe the rest are a mix of have some investments, some revenue, but it's a pretty widespread, but they're all under that
Absolutely,
threshold.
yeah.
Okay, cool.
Majority doesn't have any revenue, and I would also like to highlight there's a number of different prizes, and certainly many of those prizes also end up going to companies pre-revenue.
For sure. Yeah, good point. Thank you. Okay, so why enter? Should I enter this year? So people enter for various reasons. In terms of should I enter this year, we have companies that will just attend the seminar series 1 year. They just want to kind of check it out, test their idea against the stuff they learn, and then they come back and enter the following year or 2 years later. I remember Alexandra Greenhill. I think she's the founder of Care Team and is a great resource for startups here in the ecosystem. That's what she did. And she did that, and she entered the competition twice with 2 different companies as well. So definitely a strategy that works. But in terms of why entering, some companies, of course, are going to enter for the prizes. That's totally fine. And you might win, which is also great. I always like to say, though, 200 entries, 6, 7 prizes. So just have to keep that in mind. Don't go in only expecting to win. A lot of companies, I would say, enter to access mentorship and networking or to get feedback. And then some companies will enter really for exposure credibility. So I remember we had a company called Lumen 5 several years ago. The founder, Michael Chang, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael is his first name. He had been in the competition 2 or 3 times before with other startups, didn't really advance super far, so he really wanted to win, which he did. But he also wanted to win because he was making some very strategic hires. And if you win the competition, you can really use that to recruit. So that was a reason. Other people are entering because once you get to a certain stage, you are of interest to investors. So there's all sorts of various reasons, I would say. The only other thing I would add, I mentioned investors, is, and this relates to the stage of venture, we often will talk a lot about raising money and investment because typically when a company scales, they often need to raise investment. But do you have to be raising investment to win this competition? I'm going to say no, because we have certainly had some companies that have revenue or have other forms of building their company, and they're not necessarily seeking investment right away, and that's okay. That's not going to keep you from winning. Case in point, Times-X, they won last year. They're not raising investment, at least not right now. So I'd say often people talk about investment in startup world, but that's not necessarily for everyone. So that's not a requirement to win this competition. How much work will there be? So like everything, what you put in is what you get out, right? So at a baseline, you're doing some events if you want. You're doing a 5-page submission. If you get to round 2, you're doing 1 pitch or 2 pitches potentially, and then an 8-page submission if you get all the way to the end. The 5-page submission, the 8-page submission, if you're, like I said, raising investment, applying for accelerators, applying for grants, a lot of those questions you may have seen before or answered before, so you might be working with a pool of information you already have. If you're earlier than that, you might be answering these questions for the first time. Actually, that's another reason why sometimes people enter, because they just want to go through the process and answer those questions for themselves. But if that's the case, that probably will take you longer to craft your submission. So it really depends on where you're at, and it kind of varies. But the companies that I know that get the most benefit, especially when they get to the mentoring stage, they're booking weekly meetings with their mentors. They're building agendas. They're doing the work the mentors suggest they do. That, of course, takes time. But the intent is always not to be a distraction. It's meant to be work you need to be doing anyway to build your company, build your startup. So the hope is everything you're doing is at minimum going to be supporting you building your company, and hopefully isn't too distracting either. And sometimes it's the work you have to get done, but you often are so busy with the day-to-day, you don't have time to think about these things. So it's also a good opportunity for you to kind of, in a way, be forced to focus on these types of questions. What makes a winning venture? So I'll put in a few things and I'll see if Floyd wants to add in here too. Again, this can vary, but just from watching the final round pitches over many, many years, typically it's a coachable founder, CEO that understands the company's and the team's strengths and weaknesses. It's having a good understanding of your market and where your solution fits. It's having a good understanding of how you're going to enter the market and what size of the market you're going to capture. So at the end of the day, I think one of our jury members once said, if they were to look at it as an investment, they would be wanting a company to deliver minimum 10x of, say, what an investor would put in. So that typically is more of a company that's looking to expand to different markets and to grow and scale in the future. Floyd, anything you'd like to add to that?
Not really. Those are really the main ones. Like, there's an overarching hat maybe of like the overall evaluation, and the only way to put, very different companies together under one criteria, it's difficult to compare a SaaS company to a life sciences company at a different stage, right? So in the end of the day, there's a bit of an investor hat on it. Like, it's a similar decision-making process as an early stage investor might do in their head to figure out which company they're going to invest in. And that also comes down to talking about the risks you have that make it likely or less likely for your company to succeed, and how well you present that some of those risks aren't as risky as someone might think, basically.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Most the companies that are in the final pitch, they're not necessarily going to have all the answers figured out, but the jury needs to be convinced that the opportunity is big and that team can deliver on it. They'll be equipped to manage all the risks and the bumps that come with being a startup. Okay, so wrapping up finally, I actually talked longer than I expected, but we'll be out of here soon, depending on the questions. Upcoming events that I mentioned earlier, they are on our website, newventuresbc.com. There's a QR code there too if you want to get instant access. Again, open to all, whether you enter the competition or not. And yeah, the deadline is March 31st, midnight, and you apply online. We use I don't know if anyone here has done our Accelerate IP or IP Pathways program, so it's the same type of portal. You just you have to create an account and then you just go through the questions. And then that's it. And then I'll just say thank you to Innovate BC, our sponsors, and our many sponsors that help us put on this competition every year. Okay, so
We have some good questions in the chat. I'll briefly, maybe I'll start with something else briefly, because I find that this was helpful for me in the past, also volunteering.
Yeah.
We have about 220 companies, something like that, that join on a yearly basis with some growth, and only 15% of them, something like that, come back from a previous year. So a good amount of companies join. If you are a company that reaches top 40 and especially top 25, that means there's been quite a bit of filtering already. Like, you've beat out a lot of companies. And because of that, and also the amount of promotion we do for those 25 companies and the briefs we provide, this gets a lot of attention in Canada. If you make it to that, like, investors will likely reach out to you to have those kinds of conversations and start relationship building with you. Recruitment is easier, connecting with random people is easier, strategic partners is easier. Many even get clients out of it. And because of the effort I put into maximizing the relevance of a volunteer being hooked up to your company as a mentor, many of these mentors end up investing after the competition as well, because they have some affinity with your industry. So these are all major perks you can get out of it that have nothing to do with the prize money you might get at the end, basically. I just wanted to highlight that briefly. Then questions we had in the chat. One was, this is particularly an exception, is a company that was incorporated in 2018, but was inactive for a few years and then restarted in 2021, meaning less than 5 years ago, but on paper longer than 5 years. I answered that one. If you are a company that has a reasonable reason why you might ask for an exception on that 5-year criteria, in the application process form, on the form itself, there's a box where you can indicate asking for such an exception, and then we can look at it. We might ask a few questions, but commonly we do it. And this example here, given, I think, is probably one we'll grant an exception for, because that sounds reasonable, basically.
Yeah, agreed. And then Michael, great question around confidentiality. I don't know, Floyd, if you want to answer that.
Yeah, right. So yeah, just to mention it for those not who cannot access the chat. Working on a project with current trade secrets for crucial and wide-reaching aspects of the product. Is there a way to keep these details confidential while still fully participating? By and large, yes, by not sharing them. And that's usually the most critical argument. Like we're looking at this, like I used to be a volunteer as well. So when I say we're, it's no longer me now, but it used to be, right? Normally at this kind of thing, we're looking at it with, likelihood of success in today's market. And then most of us then are business-oriented generalist people, meaning your specific special sauce, the secret element that might be patentable or whatnot, that isn't actually the most critical thing. I, as a non-technical person, cannot place this or understand this most likely anyway. What I care about is what benefits it gives you in your company and what potential it gives you. So you can talk about the things it can do without necessarily giving away the secret and how it works. And particularly that last part is usually just not to be included. So in that context, you should be able to absolutely fully join the competition and get tons of feedback without sharing those very specific details that are much more confidential. If that's a struggle, by the way, you can get input on it or help with it as well, from mentors, other people, advisors, whatnot. Or we might be able to provide some input there as well if you're really struggling with it. But pretty much always there's a way through that.
Yeah, and there was an IP talk in our seminar series. I think it's going to be April 9th. And I think a great example of this, it's from a while ago, but it was a company called Saltworks Technologies. So when they entered and won our competition, literally 2 grad students in the basement working on their desalination technology. Couldn't tell anyone anything. But they described the market, they described the problem, they described how their solution was going to change the world. And they convinced the jury and they won. So we're not asking. No one wants to know your special sauce because that's your IP, right? But you can certainly still create the story. And we also have pitch and storytelling things as well, because that is part of communicating what you're doing. Okay. And of course, I should probably segue. We have all our IP programming, of course, as well. So there's mentorship and advisory that way. So if you're really not sure, you can go there. Okay, other questions? Did you already answer Ewan's, Floyd?
No, there's a few more. I also have one direct.
Okay.
To answer your question, Justin, do you have examples of past winners? Yes, many. There's a whole website dedicated to it. If you Google it as well, there's a gazillion. But there's some really good famous names in there, like Semios, Aspect Biosystems, Certain is in there. Appcelera was very successful. There's a bunch of them. JNAP, all very successful, that one. So there's a bunch of them. That's
And
one.
Semios actually never won. They were only in our top 10. So
Right.
that's all it takes sometimes. Yeah.
There's been an occasional interesting trend in New Ventures BC competition that the second placed company does ridiculously well commercially. So, yeah. Someone asked me a specific question, Tushar, how important is IP? It can be, it goes into the mix. Like one criteria for the competition is that there has to be some kind of piece of technology, not just a service-oriented business. So in that context, likely IP might be involved, and it is something that can drive value of a company, therefore making you possibly more likely to succeed in today's market, which is the overarching judging criteria, how we all try to put it together, basically. So it plays a role, but it's one of many variables that decide overall likelihood of success, or not a hard requirement.
Okay, and then Amin has a question here. Would a company that has gone through multiple other New Ventures VC programs have an edge in the first couple of rounds of the competition? So in the sense that you've learned stuff to help you work on your company and answer the questions, yes. In the sense of, is there an advantage because you've been through our programs? No. So the jury, we just, you submit your 5-pager, it goes to a mix of jury members, and that's That's pretty much it. They're not really looking at the other affiliations. But hopefully, if you've done not just the New Ventures programs, entrepreneurship at UBC, SFU Venture Labs, Foresight, lots of great accelerators in town, everything you've learned there will certainly better equip you to answer the questions in the round 2 of the competition. Okay. Is that all the
One more, I
questions?
think,
Okay.
from Ewan. Is there a system to match startup with mentors based on the industry they are in? Yes, I spend a lot of time on this. Many, many, many hours going through individual volunteers' background, LinkedIn, and details in an effort to maximize the relevance of my matching efforts. Like, I wouldn't say I reach 100%, in terms of relevance, but I'd like to think pretty close by the sheer amount of hours I put into this. So that's certainly the goal.
Yes. Floyd does spend a lot. We have a very large spreadsheet. Let's put it that way. So, and as companies, when you get to the mentorship round round 3, we will also ask, do you have a particular sector or a particular background that would really make a difference for you? Often the answer is no. We're just looking for general mentorship, but sometimes there is. Sometimes someone's really looking for someone with a particular background. So Floyd gets that information and tries to do what he can. Okay. Last call for questions. Otherwise, I will say thank you very much for your time and attention. And the recording will be here pretty soon on our website, so newventuresbc.com. Deadline March 31st. And we look forward to seeing you at the upcoming events. And the Web Summit in May, we'll be rolling out more information on that for startups to access as well. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Floyd. Thanks, Justine. And everyone, have a nice evening. See you soon. Take care. Bye.
Everyone.